This can be seen as racism, oppression, war, and religious conflict. No matter the era, humans always find their way to a historic reoccurrence. Slavery is another instance of this reoccurring cycle. It never ends, it just gets rebranded with a new name. Whether it be slavery, indentured servitude, or human trafficking, they all mean the same thing. The scary part being nowadays, this issue can affect anyone, no matter your race, gender, class, or age.
So true.
After much research on this topic, I have gained more insight as to what slavery truly entails. The purpose of my speech is to inform the audience that just because we do not see something doesn't mean it does not exist. First, I'll talk about slavery as it was in the past. Then I'll discuss slavery's transition into human trafficking. And finally, I'll look at where slavery is headed. So first, I'll talk about slavery as it was in the past. In America, many associate slavery with the African slave trade in the 17 and 1800s. But in reality, it has been around since the beginning of humanity itself. In fact, slavery can be traced to ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome. According to author Sean Price, it is thought that slaves were captured as prisoners of war and forced to build the pyramids in Egypt around 2650 BC. And around 500 BC, it is thought that Greece had a loose structure of slavery, according to author William Lynn Westerman. He also claims that Greece used slaves as a police force and had clubs which allowed slaves to earn money to buy back their freedom. And in ancient Rome, slaves could be inherited or given as gifts. In America, slavery began with the sale of Native Americans in the 1600s and continued on to the African slave trade in the 1700s. However, slavery during American colonization was different from that of the past, in that it was primarily race-related. In ancient times, slavery consisted of prisoners of war or indebted criminals, whereas in America, a person's race is what determines slavery. So I just talked about slavery as it was in the past. Now I will discuss slavery's transition into human trafficking. Slavery today is the biggest it has ever been. After the Emancipation Proclamation was passed in 1863 and the 13th Amendment in 1865, slavery was made illegal in the U.S. and other countries soon followed after. The issue is that just because something is illegal doesn't mean people will stop doing it. In this instance, slavery moved into the shadows and developed into what we now call human trafficking. This modern-day slavery has no limits. Traffickers do not see people but see exploits for money, sex, labor, and even organ harvesting. Trafficking isn't even isolated to one country. It can be tracked to Brazil for forced labor, Cambodia for sex trafficking children, the UK forced drug runners, and the US foster kids sold into sex slavery, and every other country in the world. According to Secretary of State Michael Pompeo, human trafficking is one of the most heinous crimes on earth. Right now, traffickers are robbing a staggering 24.9 million people of their freedom and basic human dignity. According to the 2019 Trafficking in Persons report, in 2018, it was estimated 24,407 victims in Africa, in Europe 16,838, and in South and Central Asia 24,544. Wow. These are the numbers of victims that have been officially confirmed and identified by their governments. This is a large number in itself, but because trafficking operates in the shadows and on such a large scale, the actual number cannot be known. So I just explained slavery as it was in the past and how it is currently. Now I will discuss where slavery is headed. Most governments have recognized the issue that is human trafficking and have enacted protocols or plans of actions to alleviate this problem. The Palermo Protocol, created in 2000, became one of the first international policies to define and recognize human trafficking and establish an attack plan towards traffickers. Later, organizations such as the UN and NATO would take the lead in requesting cooperation between other governments in combating trafficking. Every year on June 1st, according to the 2019 Persons Report, all governments in relation to the Palermo Protocol release reports on trafficking records of the year. A major combatant our government currently uses is creating awareness. This is by ad campaigns, social media, and many other outlets. Our government has also created a task force such as the Enhanced Collaborative Model Human Trafficking Program, and it works with other agencies such as the CIA, FBI, NSA, and so on. This is just the tip of the iceberg of plans our government and many alike use in hopes of extinguishing this problem. Slavery has always existed, but in this day and age, many are working hard to make sure it does not continue. Now let's wrap this speech up. First, I talked about slavery as it was in the past. Then I discussed slavery's transition into human trafficking. And finally, I looked at where slavery is headed. Now, although we cannot physically see slavery as we did in the past, it does still exist and impacts many lives. This is a story of someone impacted by modern-day slavery, according to the 2019 Trafficking in Persons report. At 14, Miguel had already worked for years, trying to support his family in Honduras. One night, after leaving his job at a local restaurant, two men abducted him, drugged him, and took him to the U.S. Once there, they sold him to traffickers who piled him with more drugs and forced him into sex trafficking, where he endured daily sexual assault and threat to harm his family back in Honduras. Authorities eventually found Miguel. However, he experienced further traumatization in the state foster care system. Today, Miguel is a licensed behavioral psychologist in the U.S.
Yeah.